So Jig's perspective is also sort of subtly conveyed through her words, and it is our job as the reader to again infer and read beyond just the words on the page and understand what her perspective is in regards to keeping the pregnancy. So our first impression of Jig is when she makes the remark about the hills in the distance that look like white elephants, and this seems to anger the American, her boyfriend. So this gives rise to the tension in the relationship in this conversation that they're having. And it's subtly revealed again in Jig's description of the hills like white elephants, and then her description of the Anis del Toro, the drink that they order. It's subtly suggested that again she is unhappy in this current situation, and she's causing tension to rise in bringing up these topics. So she is the one who again mentions that the hills look like white elephants, so the title of the story is sort of represented in her words. And then later she backtracks and says, "They're lovely hills. They don't really look like white elephants. I just meant the coloring of their skin through the trees." So we'll address this moment a little later, but again, very significant in regards to the underlying issue that they are arguing about. There also, a source of tension is again conveyed in their drink order. So it might seem strange that a pregnant woman and her boyfriend are ordering a drink, but again, this is the 1920s, and perhaps they want to distract themselves from making this decision, so alcohol is one way to escape the tension of this situation. And then she mentions how it tastes like licorice, and goes on to say everything tastes of licorice, especially all the things you've waited so long for, like absinthe. And then he asks her to cut it out, and then she says, "I wanted to try this new drink. That's all we do, isn't it? Look at things and try new drinks." So reading behind her words, we can see a sense of dissatisfaction in Jig's life. She seems bored and unsatisfied with their current lifestyle, which is again very much a carefree lifestyle of travel, drinking, looking at interesting sights, and a very sort of a carefree young lifestyle. She seems kind of bored and wants maybe something more in life than what they're currently doing together. And if you look at her behavior during this conversation, so once the topic of the simple operation is mentioned, Jig's Jig sort of takes a turn, so she starts contemplating what her decision will be. So at first it's describing her as the girl. So the girl looked at the ground the table legs rested on. The girl did not say anything. And then the girl looked at the bead curtain, put her hand out, and took hold of two of the strings of beads. So all this while she's quietly listening to the American as he's going about sort of trying to convince her that this operation is perfectly natural, perfectly simple, we'll be happy, and everything will be exactly the way that it was. As we continue on, we learn a little bit more about Jig and the fact that she's not as naive or passive as she first appears. So I think it seems as if she realizes that it won't be as simple or perfectly happy afterwards if they go through with this situation. So she seems to realize the consequences, the severity of this situation that she's in. And at the bottom of 166 she says, "Then I'll do it, because I don't care about me." So at this point we get a little bit of tension building again, and the suggestion that if she cared about herself she would keep the child, but she would only be doing it for the American if she goes through with it. So it's sort of, we can imply or infer that she wants to keep the child and is thinking about it during this conversation with him, with the American. And at this point she goes off to the end of the station and looks beyond. So she's looking at the Ebro River and on the other side of the valley there are sort of fields of grain and trees. So a lot of fresh life, greenery across on the other side of the valley. And they have this sort of back and forth conversation, and she says, and we could have all this, she said, and we could have everything, and every day we make it more impossible. And then the American is sort of trying to convince her, saying, we can have everything, we can have the whole world. And then Jig is the one who says, no, we can't, it isn't ours anymore. So she seems to realize that the consequences of this decision are going to alter their lives completely. They won't be the happy couple that they once were. It doesn't matter what decision they decide, if they go through with the pregnancy or if they go through with the abortion, their lives are going to be changed regardless, and you can't ever go back. And then we get a little bit more insight into her true feelings when she says, doesn't it mean anything to you? We could get along. So this is at the bottom of 167. So she's saying, doesn't it mean anything to you? So she's asking the American to, again, state outright what his feelings are in regards to the situation. And then she asks him, would you please, 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 I think there's 7, 8 pleases in there, stop talking. So she's begging him to stop talking. So this is the sort of heightened moment, the climax of the story, the highest point of tension. And then the American says, I don't want to, but I don't want you to. He said, I don't care anything about it. And then the girl says, I'll scream. So our tension escalates to this point where she begs the American to stop talking, and then their opinions are revealed. So the American says, I don't care anything about it, and Jig has just asked him if we could get along with the baby together. So it seems she's on one side of this argument, he's on the other side, and there is no sort of compromise in this situation. So we don't know, we're really left unsure of how this situation will play out. So in regards to the couple, the characters in the story, we can again infer and read into some of the details that are represented. So we have the American, a character who goes unnamed, right? He's just the American, so we know his country of origin. He knows how to speak Spanish. He's the one who interacts with the waitress and orders the drinks for them. Jig, we don't know where she's from, but she doesn't speak Spanish, so maybe she is, again, not from this territory, and maybe they just met while traveling. So we can sort of infer that these are two people who, again, are not in a long-standing relationship. They maybe met while traveling and then spent some time together, and then this event happened where she became pregnant, and this is the after effects of that situation. So we know they've been traveling together because of the detail of his suitcases are covered with all these labels. So the American has this suitcase and there are labels from all over Europe where they've spent time together. And the fact that, you know, they've been traveling and enjoying a sort of carefree lifestyle where they drink and look at interesting sights. So they're going sightseeing, and it's very sort of carefree and young lifestyle. That seems to be what the American wants out of life, but it seems Jig wants something else. So this is where they're at odds with one another. And then the fact that he's referred to as the American or the man, and Jig is referred to as her name, Jig, or the girl, also suggests there might be a bit of an age difference or a power differentiation. So he seems to maybe be the one who, again, who's ordering drinks, and she seems a little bit more dependent on him, especially when they're in Spain. So there is maybe a disparity of power within the situation, and again, that's played out within the tension of the relationship, the conversation that they're having. And in regards to their communication style, I wouldn't say this is a very healthy relationship. They don't have healthy communication. They're really talking around the issue, right? So they're avoiding being outright and saying what they want. Again, they're talking around this sensitive issue and not saying how they really feel. So it is, again, very sort of dysfunctional in terms of their communication. Jig's name is also a sort of significant detail. The fact that she's named Jig after a dance, so you can say this is also related to the fact that they're kind of dancing around the issue, as well as it sort of connotes that other idiom, the jig is up. So perhaps Hemingway is again making these sort of little clever allusions to some idioms in English language again that are implied in the story. So we have two characters who are, again, we have to read into who they are and what their worldview or perspective is on this issue. So I want to look more closely at the setting of the story. There's some elements that, again, I think are reflection of the conversation or argument that the couple are having. So Hemingway is using setting very specifically and with a direct effect of reflecting the conflict of the couple. So there's a couple of details of the setting that are important. So our very first description of setting occurs on the very first line, and the hills across the valley of the Ebro were long and white. We also get the detail of, on this side there was no shade and no trees, and the station was between two lines of rail and the sun. Close against the side of the station there was the warm shadow of the building, and a curtain made of strings of bamboo beads hung across the open door into the bar to keep out flies. The American and the girl with him sat at a table in the shade outside the building. It was very hot, and the express from Barcelona would come in 40 minutes. So again, we have the setting, very important, as a reflection of this tension, this argument that they're having. And all these elements that I've highlighted here are going to be important details that, again, we can read into and gain more insight into the conflict that is behind the argument that this couple is having. Okay, so this is my rather crude drawing of how the setting is important to the story. So we have the basic location of the couple. They're beside a train station, right, which has a beaded curtain right here. And the couple are having drinks out in the hot sun and waiting for the train. The train station itself is located between two lines of rail. And then on this side of the valley is described as brown and dry. In the far distance we have hills that are long and white. Jig also goes and looks at the Ebro River, where there is lush green trees and fields in the distance. And then we have the hot sun beating down on, adding tension to this conversation. So all these elements, these subtleties, are again a reflection of the conflict that the couple is experiencing at this time. For instance, to be stuck between two lines of rail, so one rail and the other line of rail, so located in this position, I guess we could say that it is a reflection of how the couple has to make this life-changing decision. So they can either choose the path of keeping the child, or they can make the decision to have the abortion. So it's one of two ways that their lives can go at this point. So they are at a crossroads in their life, and that's reflected in their location at the train station. We also get a sort of separation, this beaded curtain that separates the bar from the outside where they're currently situated. The bar could be seen as sort of their previous lifestyle, the American, the one that he's comfortable doing, so the drinking, and rather more of a carefree kind of life than what they are facing at this moment, which is the possibility of settling down and having a family. And then we get the hot sun, which is beating down on the young couple and adding tension to this already tense conversation that they're having. So it's adding pressure and heat and really rising their